A mysterious guest. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly around the cargo ship Iron Claw. Inside the control room, Captain Dean Carter leaned back in his chair, staring at the blinking lights on the dashboard. It had been a quiet journey so far. Too quiet. He hated quiet. Quiet meant something was about to go wrong. Just as he reached for his coffee, the ship's alarm blared. Incoming HFY Sci-Fi. Dean frowned. A distress signal in the middle of nowhere. That usually meant trouble. Either it was pirates setting a trap, or someone was desperate enough to send a call for help in this dead part of space. "Sam, get over here," Dean called to his engineer. Sam, a short but sharp-minded woman, rushed to the control panel. "Signal's weak," she said, adjusting the settings. "Looks like an escape pod. No ship nearby, just floating." Dean narrowed his eyes. Survivors. Sam tapped the screen. One life form, barely alive. Dean sighed. He had two choices: leave the pod drifting in the void or bring it on board. His instincts screamed at him to ignore it, but something about the signal felt different. "Prepare the docking bay," he ordered. "Let's bring it in." The air inside the docking bay was cold. Steam hissed from the metal walls as the escape pod was carefully pulled in. The small silver capsule had scratches all over it, as if something had tried to tear it open. Dean approached with his gun ready. He wasn't taking any chances. Sam pressed the button to open the pod. The door creaked. Inside, curled up in the tight space, was a woman, her skin pale blue, her body trembling. Her silver eyes fluttered open, locking onto Dean. Her lips moved, but her voice was too weak to be heard. "She's barely breathing," Sam muttered. Dean holstered his gun and leaned closer. "Hey, can you hear me?" The woman's mouth opened slightly. "Help. Food." Her voice was weak, but there was something unsettling about it. Not just hunger, desperation. Dean hesitated. He had seen hungry people before, but never like this. It was as if she wasn't just starving. She was fading away. "All right, let's get her to the med bay," he said, "and get her something to eat." Inside the ship's small med bay, the woman lay on the bed, her breathing slow but steady. Sam scanned her with a medical device. Her vitals are stabilizing, but she's lost a lot of energy. Dean leaned against the wall, arms crossed. What's she doing all the way out here? Alone. Before Sam could answer, the woman suddenly sat up. Her eyes, now fully open, glowed faintly in the dim light. Dean's hand moved to his gun, but she didn't seem dangerous, just exhausted. "My name is Kyra," she whispered. Dean exchanged a glance with Sam. The name wasn't human. "Where are you from?" he asked. Kyra hesitated. "Far, very far. I was running." "Running from what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she clutched her stomach. "Food." Sam sighed. "I'll grab something from the kitchen." 10 minutes later, Kyra was eating like she hadn't had food in weeks. She barely chewed, swallowing large chunks of bread and soup. Dean watched carefully. Something about her wasn't right. She was too thin, her skin almost transparent under the light. But the more she ate, the more solid she seemed, like she was regaining not just strength, but existence itself. Sam whispered, "She's eating too fast." "That's not normal." Dean nodded. "I know." When Kyra finally stopped, she exhaled slowly. Some color had returned to her face. She looked stronger. More alive. "Thank you," she said softly. Dean pulled up a chair. "Mind telling me why you were out there?" Kyra looked down, her expression darkening. "I was escaping." "From what?" She raised her glowing eyes. "From them." A cold feeling crept up Dean's spine. "Who's them?" Kyra didn't answer. She only looked at him and smiled. The princess's secret hunger. The ship was quiet, too quiet. Dean Carter lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. His gut told him something wasn't right. He had been through enough in his years as a smuggler to know when trouble was brewing, and trouble had a name now. The alien woman had eaten like a starving animal, yet something about her hunger felt wrong. He had seen desperate people before, but never someone who changed as they ate. Her skin had gone from pale and thin to vibrant, her body stronger with every bite. And then there were the whispers. Dean had heard them. Soft, faint, like voices slipping through the walls. But when he checked the medbay, Zaira had been asleep, her breathing slow and steady. No one else was there. At least, no one visible. A night of unease. By morning, the ship was still intact, but the uneasy feeling remained. Dean sat at the mess table, drinking coffee as Sam walked in, rubbing her eyes. "Tell me I'm not crazy," she muttered. Dean raised a brow. "Not unless you give me a reason." Sam sat down across from him. "Last night, I had this dream, or at least I think it was a dream. Someone was whispering to me." Dean's grip on his coffee tightened. "What did they say?" Sam frowned, shaking her head. "I don't remember. It felt like something was calling me. Like I was hungry, but not for food. And when I woke up, I swore I saw a shadow standing in my room." Dean's jaw clenched. "You're not crazy." Sam looked up. "You heard them too, didn't you?" Before Dean could answer, the door to the medbay slid open. Zaira stood there. She looked different again. Stronger. Her silver eyes seemed to shine even in the dim light. Her movements were smooth, graceful, almost too perfect. "Good morning," she said softly, stepping into the room. "I feel much better now." Dean studied her. Something about the way she moved made the hairs on his neck stand up. She was no longer the weak, desperate survivor they had pulled from that escape pod. She was something else, an unquenchable hunger. Sam, ever the scientist, got up and grabbed her medical scanner. "Let's check your vitals. Make sure you're stable." Zaira hesitated. "That won't be necessary." "Just a precaution," Sam insisted, scanning her anyway. But as soon as the device beeped, her eyes widened. Dean leaned forward. "What?" Sam shook the scanner, as if trying to fix an error. "This doesn't make sense. Her metabolism is off the charts. Her body has burned through the food we gave her 10 times faster than a normal being." Zaira shifted uncomfortably. "It's part of who I am." Dean crossed his arms. "Care to explain?" She hesitated. For a moment, she looked almost afraid. Then she sighed. "My people, we are not like you," she admitted. "We do not just eat food. We consume life." A silence filled the room. Sam took a step back. "What do you mean, life?" Zaira's gaze dropped. "I mean energy. The essence that keeps things alive. That is what I truly hunger for." Dean felt his stomach turn. "So all that food, it helps," Zaira said quickly. "But it is not enough." The dead planet. A crackle came from the ship's radio. "Incoming station detected," the automated voice announced. Dean walked over to the console. A small supply station floated ahead, abandoned but still running on emergency power. It was the perfect place to stock up. Sam frowned. "There shouldn't be a station here." Dean nodded. "It's not on any map." Zaira's expression darkened. "We should not go there." Dean looked at her. "Why not?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I know what happened there. I was running from them." Dean's patience was running thin. "Them who, Zaira?" She slowly looked up at him. "The ones who hunger like me, but without control." A cold shiver ran through Dean's body. Sam whispered, "Are you saying there are more of you? And they're worse?" Zaira nodded. "They do not eat food. They do not speak. They consume. And if they are here, they will sense me." Dean clenched his jaw. He didn't believe in curses or monsters, but something in Zaira's voice felt real. Still, they needed supplies. "We dock in 10 minutes," he said. Everyone, get ready. Thyra lowered her head. You are making a mistake. Dean turned away. He had made plenty of mistakes before. One more wouldn't kill him. At least, he hoped it wouldn't. The dead planet. The iron claw drifted toward the silent station, its metal frame groaning as it slowed. The station floated in the void like a corpse, dark, lifeless, and full of secrets. The emergency lights flickered weakly, the only sign that power still ran through its veins. Dean stood in the cockpit, staring at the station's structure on the screen. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just abandoned. It looked drained. Sam was checking the station's readings. No life signs. Oxygen levels are stable, but the power is barely holding up. Looks like it's been empty for years. Thyra stood at the back of the room, silent, her silver eyes locked onto the screen. She hadn't spoken since they decided to dock. Dean turned to her. You said you were running from something. Are they here? Thyra didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer than before. I don't know, but I can feel something. Sam scoffed. That's not exactly helpful. Dean ignored her. He had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts screamed at him to turn around. But they needed supplies. The ship was running low on fuel, rations, and oxygen filters. This station was their best chance. Dean exhaled. All right. We move fast. Get in, grab what we need, and get out. No one goes alone. He grabbed his gun and turned toward the airlock. Inside the graveyard, the station's doors hissed as they opened, revealing a hallway coated in dust. The air smelled stale, old, like a place that had been forgotten by time. Sam activated her flashlight, sweeping the beam across the walls. The metal panels were scratched, as if something had clawed at them. Dean frowned. What the hell happened here? No bodies, Sam muttered. If this place was abandoned, where did everyone go? Thyra walked cautiously, her fingers tracing the walls. Her face was unreadable, but her breathing had become shallow. Dean stopped. Thyra. She shook her head. Something was here, and it fed. A chill ran through Dean's spine. The echoes of the past. They moved through the station's corridors, their footsteps echoing against the empty walls. Every door they passed had been forced open. In the control room, Sam powered up the terminals. Static filled the screens before flickering to life. Dean stood behind her, arms crossed. Check the logs. I want to know what happened here. Sam tapped the keys, scanning through corrupted files. Finally, she found one that worked. A video feed appeared, a recording from the station's security cameras. A man in a uniform stood at a console, breathing heavily. His eyes were wide with terror. If anyone finds this, we made a mistake. The specimens, they weren't dead. We thought we could contain them, but they woke up. They took the crew. I don't know if they're still here, but if you're watching this, get out. The video cut to static. A heavy silence filled the room. Sam slowly turned to Dean. Still think this was a good idea? Dean clenched his jaw. He was already regretting this. Then the lights flickered, and Thyra's breathing sharpened. They were never alone. A noise came from the hallway. A soft, dragging sound. Slow, deliberate. Dean raised his gun. Sam reached for her knife. Thyra stood still, her glowing eyes locked on the doorway. The dragging sound stopped. The hallway beyond them was empty. The air was thick, too thick, like the silence itself was alive. Then something moved, a shadow, just at the edge of their vision. Sam whispered, "We need to leave. Now." Dean agreed, but as he turned back to the console, the screens glitched, and suddenly, a new video feed appeared. Live footage. From inside the station, the camera showed the hallway outside, and in the corner of the screen, a figure stood, watching. Its body was thin, twisted, its skin pale and stretched, its face too smooth, like something that had forgotten how to be human. It didn't move. It only stared. Then, the camera cut to black. The hunt begins. The ship's radio crackled in Dean's ear. "They know you're here." His blood ran cold. That voice wasn't Sam's. It wasn't Tyra's. It wasn't human. Dean grabbed Sam's arm. "We're leaving. Now." They ran. Footsteps echoed behind them, too many to count. Sam shouted, "They're coming." Dean turned and fired his gun down the hallway. The bullets hit nothing, just empty air. But the shadows moved. And then, a scream. Zyra dropped to her knees, clutching her head. "No, no, no." Dean grabbed her. "What's happening?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're inside my mind." Then the lights died, and the darkness came alive. Hunted in the dark. The lights were gone. Darkness swallowed the station, thick and suffocating. Dean Carter's pulse pounded in his ears. The only sound was his own ragged breathing and the soft, distant scrape of something moving. They weren't alone. His fingers tightened around his gun as he crouched low, his eyes scanning the pitch-black hallway. Sam was beside him, her back pressed against the cold metal wall. Lyra was on the floor, trembling, her hands clutching her temples as though trying to block out an unbearable sound. "Kaxira," Dean whispered urgently. "What's happening?" Her glowing silver eyes flickered open, filled with pain. "They're inside," she choked out. "Inside my mind." Dean felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who?" Zara's breath came in short gasps. "The Hungering." Sam swallowed hard. "That's a terrible name." A whisper slithered through the hallway, like wind but wrong. It wasn't air moving, it was voices. Dean gritted his teeth. "We need to get back to the ship. Now." The chase begins. Dean grabbed Zyra's arm and pulled her up. She was weak, her legs unsteady. "We don't have time for this," Sam hissed. Then the whispering stopped. Silence. And then, bang! A door at the far end of the hallway slammed open. Dean didn't wait to see what had caused it. "Run." They sprinted down the corridor, boots slamming against metal. Dean could hear something behind them, something fast. The emergency lights flickered, giving him glimpses of shadows that shouldn't move. Then, the air around them grew heavy. Dean's vision blurred, his limbs slowed, like something was pulling at his energy. A cold voice echoed through his skull. "Stay, stay with us. Become part of us." His knees buckled. He felt like he was drifting away, like his very existence was being drained. Then, Zyra screamed. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. A pulse of white-hot energy blasted outward from her body. The weight vanished. Dean gasped, stumbling forward. Sam yanked him upright. "What the hell was that?" he panted. Zyra clutched her head. They were pulling at your essence. Feeding off you." Sam shuddered. "Well, that's horrifying." Dean didn't argue. He turned back to Zyra. "Can you do that again?" Zyra shook her head, her breath ragged. "It takes too much from me." Dean cursed under his breath. They were out of time. The airlock was just ahead. The iron claw was still docked. If they could just reach it. Then, the shadows moved. The Hungering revealed. They weren't shadows. They were things. Tall, emaciated figures, their skin stretched too thin over jagged bones. Their faces were smooth, lacking eyes, mouths, or noses, until they began to shift. Their blank skin peeled open, revealing gaping black maws, lined with rows of teeth. Dean raised his gun and fired. The bullets hit, but the creatures didn't bleed. They only laughed. Their bodies rippled, shifting like liquid, reforming where the bullets had torn through them. Sam screamed. "That's not fair." Zyra pushed past Dean. Her silver eyes blazed with light. "Stay back," she warned. One of the creatures tilted its head, mocking her. "You are one of us," it whispered. Zyra's entire body shook. "No," she whispered. "You are hungry." Her breath hitched. Her fingers trembled. And then, for the first time since they had found her, Dean saw fear in her eyes. The truth about Zyra. The creatures lunged. Dean grabbed Zyra, pulling her toward the airlock. "Move." Sam slapped the emergency override, opening the hatch. "Go, go, go." The ship's interior was just steps away. Then, Zyra stopped. Her feet froze on the metal floor, her eyes locked onto the creatures. They weren't attacking her. They were waiting. Dean turned to her. "Zyra, what are you doing?" She stared at the creatures, her breath ragged. Her hands twitched, like she was holding something back. Dean grabbed her shoulders. "We have to go." Zyra's voice was barely a whisper. "What if I belong with them?" Dean's blood ran cold. Sam gaped. "Excuse me, Waket." Zyra's silver eyes glowed brighter. Her body shuddered, as if something inside her was waking up. The creatures reached for her. "Come home," they whispered. And for a moment, just a moment, Zyra stepped forward. The captain's choice. Dean reacted. He grabbed Zyra and yanked her back, throwing her into the ship. She screamed. The creatures lunged, but Sam slammed the airlock controls. The hatch sealed shut just as the creature's claws scraped against it. The ship's alarms blared. The docking clamps released. Dean barely made it to the cockpit, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. "We're leaving." Engines roared to life. The iron claw pulled away from the station, breaking free just as the shadows inside began to swell, spreading like a disease, a hunger that had been denied its meal. Inside the ship, Zyra sat curled in a corner, her body shaking violently. Sam stared at her, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Dean wiped sweat from his forehead. "I don't know." He turned to Zyra. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring out the window, back at the dying station. Her silver eyes were wide. And for the first time, she looked hungry. The true predator. The iron claw drifted through the empty void, leaving the cursed station behind. Inside the ship, silence hung like a heavy weight. Dean Carter sat in the cockpit, gripping the controls with white knuckles. His heart was still pounding, adrenaline refusing to fade. He had seen things before: pirates, war zones, creatures that lurked in the forgotten corners of space. But nothing like this. Nothing like them. His gaze flickered to the reflection in the cockpit's glass. Tyra, sitting at the back of the room. Her silver eyes were locked on the stars, but her expression wasn't one of relief. It was hunger. Real, raw hunger. Dean exhaled slowly. "You almost went with them." Sam leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest. No, she wanted to go with them. Zyra didn't respond. That was the worst part. A dangerous truth. Dean turned his chair to face her. "Talk." Zyra's glowing eyes flickered. "What do you want me to say?" Sam scoffed. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe explain why the hell those nightmare creatures were treating you like their long-lost sister." Zyra flinched, her hands tightening into fists. "Because I am one of them." Silence. Dean's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Explain." Zyra swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "My people, we don't just eat food. We need essence, energy, life force. Most of us can control the hunger, keep it small. But some," her voice trembled, "some let the hunger consume them. They become the hungering." Sam's jaw clenched. "And which one are you?" Zyra's fingers dug into her arms. "I don't know." Dean studied her carefully. "You hesitated back there. You almost let them take you." Zyra looked down. "Because part of me wanted to." A cold chill ran through Dean's veins. Sam threw up her hands. "That's it. We can't trust her. She could be just like them." Zyra's head snapped up, eyes blazing. "I am not like them." "Prove it," Sam challenged. Xira opened her mouth, but no words came. Because she couldn't. Because she didn't know if it was true. A hidden threat. Dean pushed himself to his feet. "We can figure this out later. Right now, we need to get the hell away from this sector before more of those things show up." He turned back to the control panel, ready to set the coordinates. Then the ship lurched. The lights flickered. A high-pitched, screeching sound filled the air. Sam cursed. What the hell was that? Dean's fingers flew over the controls. Something's wrong with the power core. Xira's face went pale. "No, it's not the core. It's them." Sam whirled on her. "We left them behind." Xira slowly shook her head. "Not all of them." A chill crawled up Dean's spine. "Are you saying one of those things is on the ship?" Xira's silver eyes darkened. "No," she hesitated. "I'm saying, I think I brought something with me." The ship shuddered again. Then the lights went out. The ghost in the ship. Total darkness. Dean's hand went to his gun. "Sam, emergency lights." Now. A few seconds later, dim red lights flickered to life. The ship was bathed in a blood-colored glow. Sam pulled out her scanner. "I don't see anything." Then, the whispering started. Soft, too soft to understand. But it was everywhere. Dean's heart pounded. "Xira, is that them?" Xira's breathing was shaky. "It's not them. It's me." Sam's grip on the scanner tightened. "What does that mean?" Xira slowly turned to face them. Her eyes were brighter now, almost too bright. Her body was shaking, not in fear, but in something else. Something primal. Dean took a cautious step back. "Xira, what's happening to you?" Xira's fingers twitched. I don't know. I feel hungry." Her voice wasn't the same. It was deeper, richer, more alien. And then the air around them shifted. Dean could feel it. Something was being pulled, something inside him. Sam gasped. "Dean, do you feel that?" He did. His energy, his strength. It was draining away. And Xira was getting stronger. The turning point. Dean grabbed his gun. "Xira, stop." Xira's eyes snapped at him, wide with shock. "I am not doing this on purpose." "Then fight it." Her hands curled into fists. Her entire body was vibrating, as if something inside her was about to break free. Sam groaned, gripping her head. Dean, I can't." She fell to her knees. Dean's own vision blurred. His strength was fading. Xira took a shaky breath. "I don't want this." Dean forced himself to stay standing. "Then prove it." "Stop." Xira's whole body convulsed. She threw her head back, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The ship trembled. The red emergency lights flashed. Then, Xira's silver eyes dimmed. And suddenly, Dean could breathe again. Sam gasped, slumping to the floor. "What the hell?" Dean barely held himself upright. His entire body ached, as if he had just run a marathon with weights strapped to his back. He looked at Xira. She was collapsed, barely breathing. Her body was smaller, as if she had drained her own strength to stop herself. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, Xira whispered, "I told you. I'm not like them." Dean watched her carefully. But in the back of his mind, one question remained. What if she was? Bargain with a beast. The iron claw drifted through the vast void of space, but inside, the air felt heavy. Thick with something unseen. Something dangerous. Dean Carter sat at the mess hall table, staring at the metal surface, lost in thought. His mind kept replaying what had happened. The whispers. The draining energy. Xira almost losing control. She had stopped herself, but what if she hadn't? Across from him, Sam nursed a cup of coffee, her face pale and tired. She looked like she had barely slept, and Dean didn't blame her. "So," she said, her voice flat. Are we just gonna pretend we don't have a literal energy vampire on board? Dean exhaled, rubbing his temples. No, but right now, we don't have much of a choice. Sam scoffed. We always have a choice, like dumping her at the nearest station and letting someone else deal with this nightmare. Dean shook his head. You saw those things. If she hadn't stopped them from draining us completely, we'd be dead. She's the reason we're still breathing. Sam glared at him. She's also the reason we were almost drained in the first place. Dean couldn't argue with that. A soft clinking sound made them both turn. Zaira stood in the doorway. She looked weak, her body still recovering. Her silver eyes had lost their glow, and her breathing was shallow. She held onto the wall as if standing was a challenge. I heard what you said, she murmured. Dean and Sam exchanged a glance. Zaira took a slow step forward. You're afraid of me. And you should be. Sam tightened her grip on her coffee. Glad we're on the same page. Zaira looked down, guilt flickering across her face. I didn't mean for it to happen. Dean leaned forward. Then help us understand. What are we really dealing with here? Zaira hesitated, then sat down slowly. I told you before. My kind. We feed on energy, but we aren't all the same. Some of us take only what we need. Control it. Others, her voice trailed off. The hungering, Dean finished for her. She nodded. They don't just feed. They consume. They drain entire planets, entire civilizations, until nothing is left. That station we found. She swallowed. It wasn't abandoned. It was devoured. Sam stiffened. You knew that before we docked. Zaira closed her eyes. I suspected it, but I wasn't sure. And I was afraid. Dean studied her carefully. Afraid of what? Them. She hesitated. Afraid of becoming like them. The words hung in the air. Sam's voice was laced with frustration. So what? You think you're different? Because from where I'm sitting, you almost drained us like a power source. Zaira flinched. I know. Dean exhaled. Then how do we know it won't happen again? Zaira's hands curled into fists. Because I don't want it to. Sam scoffed. That's not an answer. Zaira lifted her gaze. Her silver eyes met Dean's. Then let me prove it. Dean narrowed his eyes. How? She took a deep breath. I'll make you a bargain. The deal. Dean leaned back in his chair. I don't make deals with things I don't trust. Zaira didn't flinch. Then consider this a test. Let me help you. Let me control this hunger. Train it. Sam gave her a disbelieving look. Train it. Like you're housebreaking a pet. Zaira's expression darkened. More like keeping a weapon from misfiring. Right now, I'm unstable. Weak. The hunger inside me is still trying to take control. If I don't learn to balance it. She swallowed. I could end up just like them. Dean folded his arms. So you want our help? Zaira nodded. You saved me. I want to return the favor. I can be an asset to you, if you let me. Sam scoffed. Or you could be a ticking time bomb. Dean thought for a moment. He had a rule. Never trust anyone who needed to eat more than once a day. This was way beyond that. And yet, she had fought against her instincts to save them. She had stopped herself. That had to count for something. All right, he said finally. We do this my way. If I even suspect you're losing control, you're gone. No second chances. Zaira met his gaze. Agreed. Sam muttered under her breath. Worst idea ever. Dean ignored her. First step, you said you can control the hunger. How? Zaira hesitated. I need to feed, but in a controlled way. I don't have to drain life. I can absorb energy in different forms. Dean frowned. Like what? Zaira took a breath. Heat, electricity, even kinetic energy. Sam's eyes narrowed. And if that's not enough? Zaira's fingers twitched. Then I have to feed on something living. The room fell into silence. Dean clenched his jaw. We're not giving you a crew member as a snack. Zyra quickly shook her head. I wouldn't ask you to. There are other ways. Criminals, slavers, people who already steal life from others. Sam rubbed her temples. Great. Now we're supposed to be space vigilantes, hunting bad guys so our pet monster can have a snack. Zyra's gaze hardened. You don't have to help me. But if I don't control this, I will become the thing you fear. Dean exhaled slowly. He hated this, hated that there wasn't a simple answer. But he had seen the hungering. He had felt their presence, their endless thirst. If Zyra became like them, it wouldn't just be their problem. It would be the entire galaxy's. He leaned forward, staring her down. Fine. We try it your way. But if you lose control even once. Zyra met his gaze. I won't. Dean wasn't convinced, but he was willing to find out. The final feast. The iron claw drifted through the void, silent as a grave. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Dean Carter sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the endless darkness of space. They had made a deal with Zyra, a bargain with something that wasn't fully human. And now he had to wonder, had they made a mistake? Behind him, soft footsteps approached. He didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. Zyra's voice was quiet, but there was something different about it. You don't trust me. Dean exhaled. You're right. I don't. A beat of silence. Then, you shouldn't. That made him turn. She stood in the dim cockpit light, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. But there was something wrong. Her presence felt heavier, more powerful. Like she wasn't just Zyra anymore. Dean's fingers twitched toward his gun. What's going on? Zyra tilted her head. I thought you already knew. The ship suddenly shuddered. The lights flickered. Dean's stomach dropped. Something was here. He grabbed the intercom. Sam, report. Static. His blood ran cold. Zyra took a slow step forward. You should have killed me when you had the chance. The monster awakens. Dean reacted instantly, pulling his gun and aiming it at her chest. Stay back. Zyra stopped. She glanced at the weapon, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. A slow, knowing smile. You won't shoot me. Dean's grip tightened. Try me. The ship groaned around them. The walls whispered. Zyra's breath hitched. She wasn't alone anymore. The hungering had found her. She took another step. Dean didn't hesitate. He fired. The bullet hit. But Zyra didn't fall. Her body shimmered like liquid, absorbing the energy of the impact. She exhaled slowly, eyes glowing. I don't need food anymore, she murmured. I am the hunger. The lights died, and the ship screamed. The hunt begins. Dean ran. He didn't have a choice. His gun was useless. His ship was changing. The metal creaked, the air thickening with a presence that wasn't supposed to exist in this world. The hungering were inside now. He sprinted toward the engineering bay, slamming the emergency override. The doors sealed behind him with a hiss. Sam was there, crouched behind the control panel, her face pale. Dean, what the hell is happening? He leaned against the wall, catching his breath. She lost control. Sam's face darkened. So we're dead. Dean shook his head. Not yet. Sam scoffed. You got a plan. Dean pulled out his last emergency protocol. Yeah, we're blowing the damn ship. Bargain with the Queen. Before Sam could argue, the lights flickered again. The air shifted. Zyra was there, but she wasn't Zyra anymore. Her body had changed. Her skin shimmered with energy, her silver eyes glowing like stars going supernova. The hunger in her gaze was endless. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Dean aimed his gun again. You're damn right I do. She shook her head. You still don't understand. Sam gritted her teeth. Oh, we understand just fine. Zaira smiled, but there was something different now. A sadness, a realization. This was never about you, she said softly. It was about me. Dean hesitated. What are you talking about? Her hands trembled. I thought I was different. I thought I could fight it. But the truth is, she exhaled shakily, I was always going to end up like them. Sam clenched her jaw. So what? We're supposed to just let you drain us? Zaira shook her head. No. Dean's breath caught in his throat. Zaira lifted her hand. The ship shuddered, but not from attack. From release. The hungering screamed, their whispers fading as Zaira absorbed them, pulled them into herself. Dean's stomach twisted. What are you doing? Zaira's silver eyes locked onto his. I'm making a choice. A pulse of pure energy exploded outward. And the hungering were gone. Zaira collapsed. The aftermath. Silence. Dean barely realized he was still alive. The ship was still intact. The whispers had vanished. The suffocating hunger was gone. Sam sat up, blinking. Did we survive? Dean turned toward the figure lying motionless on the floor. Tyra. She was barely breathing. Dean crouched beside her. Hey, stay with me. Her eyes flickered open. I'm still here, she whispered. Sam hesitated. Yeah, but which version of you? Zaira exhaled weakly. The one who made a choice. Dean's chest tightened. She had absorbed them, taken their hunger into herself. He didn't know what that meant. But he knew one thing. She had saved them. For now. The Queen rises. Days later, the ship was still quiet. Dean stood in the cockpit, watching the distant stars. Behind him, Zaira approached. She looked human again. But something had changed. You okay? He asked. She smiled softly. I think so. Dean studied her carefully. You took them into yourself. Zaira nodded. Yes. Sam leaned against the wall. So what now? You just live with this. Zaira's silver eyes glowed. But this time, there was no hunger. There was control. I don't know, she admitted. But I do know one thing. Dean raised a brow. What's that? Zaira's smile was small, but dangerous. I'm not afraid anymore. She turned toward the window, staring at the stars. And for the first time, she looked like more than just a survivor. She looked like a queen with the hunger of a god, and a choice to make.